We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a 3rd grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this chance, number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. But what many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofadostv@gmail.com.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the mountain. Good evening in the central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective, bringing you those ADOCS hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering. And today, family, starting a new series. Yes, yes, yes. I'm so glad you decided to join me in this new series. The Ida B. Wells 2.0 series. I'm going to do a whole thing on Ida B. Wells as a part of my Freed Women History Every Day of the Month series. But many of you may already know who she is. She was an extraordinary journalist of yesteryear who reported about all of the lynchings in the South. And those racists literally burned down her newspaper. But like I said, I'm going to get into a whole segment on her when we celebrate her at another time. Today is going to be in two parts, actually, because I don't want to be too long-winded. I'm trying to do this show, this segment in 1 hour, and then I'm going over to another new series, which is entitled Immigrants, If It Weren't for ADOCS, Why You Should Be an Ally in Our Fight for Social and Economic Justice. And that's going to be very exciting. That's coming on in about 1 hour, so I'll be jumping off of here at around 6:55 to get that show all set up. So without further ado, let me jump into today's topic. Ida B. Wells, and being nicknamed that by Travis Johnson, who is in the movement, he's in the reparationist movement, has inspired this series because I am very over the white media and the government being complicit in trying to change the narrative now that the world is focused on Black life mattering. They are doing everything they can to change that narrative to Asian lives matter. And they're also trying to make it appear as if the issue with anti-Asian racist sentiment falls at the feet of American descendants of chattel slavery. What's up, Kimberly? Thank you so much for joining the live. And thank you to those of you who have yet to chat. I thank you for being here. I know there's so much rich new Black media out there to choose from. I'm tired of trying to figure out when to go on. So I go on when I get a window, and I give you as much advance notice as I can. You can always watch the archives. But this show will always go on because I know what I bring to the new Black media is a voice that makes many of my comrades very proud. So I'm not going to sit up here and be all caught up in who's going on when, because nobody takes those concessions for me. So there you have it. I will be on with several different series. I want to thank you, Tenzi, Travelista Flakes in the chat. She and a son, Powell, from NAASD, ADOS, DMV, formerly, have really been helping me to flesh out some awesome series ideas that God has just put on me. It's about 8 different series coming, y'all. So you never know. I'm trying to get on here with one series a day, but ADOCS life is forever happening, and that may or may not be possible. But what I do know is that when I move to do so, I will be scheduling these lives. So this particular Ida B. Wells 2.0 series is twofold. First of all, George Floyd, okay? This trial is critical. And many of you already know that I'm not pleased at all with Biden and his administration for trying to change this narrative to an all Asian lives matter when we know that the average median income of Asians, or the median net worth, I have to go look at those statistics on the next show. I'll give it to you straight. But it's about 387,000. When half of the homeless families or more since COVID in this country are American descendants of chattel slavery by design of legislation wrought with institutional systemic racism. So every time I look up, I see them doing more to pour into the Asian Americans who have access to whiteness. They're doing far better than even white itself in this country, which is why you saw them white folks storm the Capitol. See, we get executed. They get a slap on the wrist, if that. And so George Floyd, I'm going to be focused on him every day of this series because he deserves for us to tell the truth, as do many of our slain by the hand of the race soldiers who have qualified immunity. They can kill us with immunity, with impunity, however you want to call it. And I'm here to tell you, I am not here for it. So I decided, based on me and Ida B. Wells' conversation, I cried about this series. This is a very tough series because it requires that I look at things that are heavy on my heart. But then I think about Ida B. Wells and her ilk. And then I say to myself, I feel like going on. And the challenge with the mainstream media is they're never coming to the grassroots where these executions are happening. Hell, the jury is not even comprised of the grassroots where these executions are happening. Okay? So this is about George Floyd plus. Since the mainstream media wants to sit up here and act like Asians are having a harder time of anti-racist sentiment than the very ADOCS whose ancestors built this country with their lives through heinous chattel slave labor, then I have to stay very prayed up, and I pray that you keep me lifted. I have to stay very prayed up during this series because Ida B. Wells 2.0 is to address all of the executions by civilians and race soldiers alike. That's what this series is about. Since they want to hide it, now I got to tell it. And so let's get into it. Let's get into it. I want to, Kevin Means, what's your vision, mission statement? How are you organized? I'm interested in helping to support reparations through organized efforts. I'm glad you asked, Mr. Kevin Means. We need all hands on deck. Yes, we do. You can reach me at friends of ADOS TV at gmail.com. And I can put you in touch with what I'm doing as Equity Advocates PAC to replace the lanes in Congress with full-chested reparationists, cash in the trillions over multi-generations. And I can put you in touch with people who are moving locally where you are. So I'm going to put that in the chat. Bear with me. I thank you for asking. Excellent question. And I wish everybody would ask this question because we need everybody. So I'm putting this in here. Friends of ADOS TV at gmail.com. And then, of course, you can visit my website, www.equityadvpac.com. It's all in the chat. We need all hands on deck. We are at George Floyd, 9 minutes and 29 seconds as the trial has just exposed. So thank you for your question. And welcome, Teresa Moses, and to all of you. So let's get in. I first want to talk about the illustrious George Floyd, you see. Institutional systemic racism is how we became the anchor of this country. So I'm going to jump right in to tell you about how they stole George Floyd's family's wealth. Now, this brother was just coming off of COVID. But this government wants to sit up here and play and then want to look and then want to kill him because he allegedly went inside Cup Foods and spent a $20 counterfeit check. So this government has failed George Floyd and every one of us ADOCS in those communities where the race soldiers are policing. Are they in the Asians community when they're worth $387,000 net worth? Are they in the white community when they're pulling up about $250K Are they in Hispanic communities who have less education than us, but are within $3,500 of our median income out here in California? We are 44% of the degree. They are 17%. Our median income is 53.5. Theirs is 50. So where do you think the race soldiers are? And why do you think that is? I'm glad you asked. Let's dig in, Kunta. Good to see you, my love. You guys chat amongst yourselves. You know I'll be back. I'm going to jump over here to this article and read to you. And of course, as you already know, I'm going to be commenting in between. So, generational theft. Our martyr George Floyd's family was robbed of 500 acres. Okay. This is an article, June 12, 2020, from the Mogoldom Nation. All right. So I got, what am I at? Okay, I got about 45 minutes. Racism and the broken promise of 40 acres and a mule have stripped the African-American families of wealth for generations. George Floyd's family is no different. Recent protests triggered by his brutal death at the hands of Minneapolis police aren't only about his murder, but it's institutional systemic racism that has plagued Black people for centuries. Me speaking. Where you at, Biden, with our anti-lynch law? You run around here trying to protect Asians who 68% of their assaults are verbal. We are dying out here because of policies and legislation on the books that says the ADOCS man has no rights that the white supremacist glacier donkey is bound to have to respect. Where are you, Jim Crow Joe? Where are you with the executive orders to dismantle and decimate qualified immunity throughout the entire country so that these race soldiers can actually be held accountable for executing us? We got to cross fingers and toes right now, praying that Chauvin gets 40 years for second-degree murder of all three of his counts in general population. We got to get nervous stomachs and pray till we have an aneurysm. And that's because of the laws of the land that say the white racist, the white inferiors, don't have to respect the rights of American descendants of chattel slavery who built all the wealth in this country that you and the immigrants eat from. Where you at with our executive order as you run around here protecting Asians, as you sit up on national TV and weaponize the execution of George Floyd by government-sanctioned execution to uplift the Asians who are very much like you? These Asians are our white oppressors. And so, like in the words of Malcolm X, the chickens are coming home to roost, Asians. And now you all of a sudden want to get together and become an ally, when you are just as guilty. Look up Latasha Harlins, the beautiful young sister, 15 years old, executed by an Asian in the local grocery store over an orange juice. Look up Gerling. Peter Liang executed him in the stairwell of his environmentally racist tenement housing. Philando Castile, and more recently, Thao, in the case of George Floyd, stood there and pushed on the eyewitnesses who were begging that demonic race soldier Chauvin to get his knee up off the man's neck. And this is what 87% of our electorate voted for. The author of the 94 crime bill, Jim Crow segregationist Sloppy Joe. And now he's doing exactly as he's promised to ADOCS. Absolutely nothing. But I digress. Back to the text. So, in Floyd's case, his ancestors had 500 acres stolen from them. Floyd's grandparents were sharecroppers, and his aunt Angela Harrelson recently told the LA Times how they taught their kids to get along in a slowly desegregating America. Sit at the back of the bus. Do what white folks tell you. Stay strong and hold on. And it still didn't prevent this race soldier's knee to the neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Harrelson says she now sees others staying strong for her nephew, George, who moved to Minneapolis 3 years ago to be closer to Harrelson and to build a new life. Floyd, 46, was a father of 3 who left the low-income Houston neighborhood where he grew up. Harrelson promised his mother that she would look after him. In Minneapolis, Floyd worked as a bouncer and a retail clerk. He got engaged. A year after he moved, Floyd's mother died, and Harrelson says she felt even more responsible for him. She warned him about interacting with the local white establishment, specifically the area police. She spoke from the Black experience. Her great-grandfather was a slave named Hillary Thomas Stewart, who got his freedom at age 8 and settled near Goldsboro, North Carolina, the LA Times reported. By age 21, Stewart had amassed 500 acres of land and married a woman named Larcinia. Unfortunately, the couple couldn't read or write, and when white farmers took over their land, Stewart and his wife didn't have the tools to fight back. Isn't that what's happening to us this day? They've neutralized us economically. Now they're trying to weaponize immigration against us to neutralize our vote, the only commodity we've got. Back to the text. Now, reflecting on what happened to her nephew, Harrelson knows it's the result of deep-rooted racism and inequality. She said what happened to George changed people's hearts. That's a huge start because you can't do something if you don't acknowledge it. They just say you're playing the race card. That happened 400 years ago, but it's institutional systemic racism, me speaking. This is why I'm demanding in excess of $104 trillion for our reparations. And I need all hands on deck. Yes, I do. For slavery, Jim Crow and ACCRUED, ongoing institutional systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. They render you helpless through the legislation, where you can't even afford to fight for your rights. The same attitude that would lead an officer to kneel in the back of the neck of someone under their custody, under their supposed care, are the same attitudes harbored by bank lenders, real estate agents, appraisers, said Andre M. Perry, a fellow at the Brookings Institution, in a Vox interview. And it is still about that land. You know, for so long in the country, who owns land controls so much of our political system, Perry said. Landowners feel the privilege to dictate policy. There's also a sense of entitlement that this is their community. This is, I get to dictate what I want to do in the community based on the fact that I own land, own property. Oh yeah, I'm going to be bringing you more of these kinds of stories in the Immigrants If It Worked for ADOCS series, okay? Moving on, and scrolling down. Listen to episode 72 with Jamarlin Martin, part 2. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, may not be around, but his energy is present in new Black politics. Me speaking. This was all throughout the 16-page dossier where they were profiling us for that jury. They profiled the likes of my kind that are in this fight for social and economic justice and inclusion. Yes, they did. I've already done that show. I'm not going to go through that right now. But even to this day, you've got the mainstream media complicit in disparaging our work. And that's why the revolution is being social mediaized. While I'm at it, if one of you lovelies could type in the chat, www.fixhr40.com. www.fixhr40.com. You got Black immigrants, Sheila Jackson Lee, of Jamaican descent in charge of our reparations. How does that work? And then you've got the unmitigated gall to say no cash repair when you can't come up with any other ideas about how to close the over $100 trillion with a T egregious racial wealth gap. You and Barack Obama know the reparations. Well, you're for the study. That's a pander for the black vote. We already know and we see you. And I've got a solution and a strategy that I'm going to share with you at the end of this segment about how we need to weaponize that vote and socialize that suffering. Okay? Because clearly a trifecta of either party brings us to George Floyd 9 minutes, 29 seconds on the neck for all the world to see as he urinates himself and cries for his late mother till he lay lifeless. They threw him on that gurney like he was garbage. The paramedics told Chauvin to get the knee up off the neck, then went back to the ambulance to take the gurney out. He was dead on arrival. So, the definition of insanity is to continue to deliver these dimmerets at the top of the ticket while expecting a different result. How, after all these years that we've been caping for them, are we the anchor of the country? And Sheila Jackson Lee has the unmitigated gall to sit up here and say no cash repair without any solution on how to make us whole after they stole everything. Back to the text. Edgar J. Hoover, the first, may not be around, but his energy is present in new black politics. They're COINTELPROing us. They shadow ban me. They censor me all the time. That's why you need to like, share, subscribe at YouTube. Because Facebook is on my neck. They don't want this truth to get out to the people. But I will not be silent. FBI agents and informants were used to weaken Marcus Garvey, the Nation of Islam, and the Black Panthers, in many cases for money and career advancement. How could this energy metastasize into the new blacks politics in 2020? Jamarlin goes solo to discuss who is doing the trading and what is being traded to weaken the aggregate black political position. That's something altogether different. I don't know why they put that in the middle of the article. But hey, it was good. It was good exchange. Get my juices flowing. Black people have been systematically denied housing and discouraged to have housing for generations, Perry added. Can years of generational theft be rectified? Of course it can, when you cut us those checks. I see you, Evanston, Illinois. You got $10 million, which is a down payment on the reparations you owe for what you did to black folk in Evanston. But now you've got the unmitigated gall to tell them it can only be used, this first 400,000, I think it benefits about 16 people. It can only be used for a down payment for housing. How are they supposed to keep up with the notes with unemployment and underemployment in the shop? Humor me that. How dare you insult us when Barack Obama cut checks for the Jews in the tune of $12 million with our tax money? Did he tell them how to spend it? Did the Germans tell the Jews how to spend the $833 billion or greater that they paid them today? When y'all cut the checks for the Japanese, did you tell them how to spend their $20,000? Who do you think you are to insult ADOCS in this way? Not everybody's going to run out here and buy a 40-ounce company let me tell you something. Buying 40 ounces and weaves and hair to do your braids and Jordans, none of this will close an over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth gap. And guess what else? If that's what they choose to waste their money on, if they choose to take their reparations and burn it in the town square? What's that to you? It's not your monkey and not your circus. So stop treating us like children. Let the voices of ADOCS and the reparationist movement at that table to tell you how we will receive our reparations. Like you did the Japanese, like you did the Jews, like you did the Indians. Not unless drastic change is made, according to the civil rights lawyer Michelle Alexander, author of the new Jim Crow Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. The black-white economic divide is as wide today as it was more than 50 years ago. And the same divide and conquer tactics that were used to prevent multiracial alliances for economic justice in the 1800s and 1900s were employed yet again in 2016 with spectacular results. As white Americans, fearful of losing political power because of profound democratic changes, elected a formal reality show billionaire to the presidency, a man who unleashed racist tirades against immigrants on the campaign trail and vowed to make America great again by taking us back to a time we supposedly left behind, perhaps the time of civil war, Alexander wrote in the New York Times column. Excuse me? Explain to me in the chat how it was more sound to replace a racist in office of 4 years with no record against ADOCS, with racists, plural, in office a combined 65 years, with records, plural, against ADOCS several New York City blocks long. This is the kind of spin that I'm talking about, and I've got a solution. Weaponize the vote. I'm going to share it at the end of the segment before I jump to the immigrants series. You guys allowed the mainstream media to convince you that Trump was worse than Biden. He's been in there a whole quarter. Miraculously, the COVID has disappeared. Miraculously. Woo! Out of nowhere. Out of the blue. While they continue to push these COVID vax, Krispy Kreme is working on a huge promotion. You ain't never had COVID, but if you get that vax, they're going to give you a Krispy Kreme donut daily for 1 year. Just show them proof that you vaxxed. So you never had COVID, now they're serving you up diabetes? Okay. I digress. Unless we choose a radically different path now, our persistent racial divisions and oppressive political and economic systems may unravel our democracy sooner rather than later, she added. Okay, so I'm at 6:33. I'm going to save my next article for the next time I come on with this series, which will be probably tomorrow if I can stay awake to look at the trial for today. I like to look at those and then take my notes. I got a couple of takeaways from there, but it's not done cooking yet. So let me jump to my notes about the first day one of the the Chauvin trial, the George Floyd case. So let's jump to my notes. Okay, this defense attorney, what I said in Facebook is, nothing he ran down as a form of defense warranted the execution of George Floyd. I was waiting to hear something. I don't know if you watched it. You know, some of us are still working from home, myself included. I work in the courts. And so in between dealing with my judges, I'm over here trying to shout out to Kimberly Witcher. Lord knows I didn't want to get involved, but she was involved and she was all in her feelings. And she's absolutely right. Day 2 is a little easier, even though they're showing the video incessantly. And that thrills me. That thrills me. Now, it's hard because I cry every time. It's very difficult to watch, but I just think on the resilience of our ancestors and I feel like going on. Anywho, I digress. So, my first point is that the prosecution, in my opinion, is doing an extraordinary job. I almost wish the defense could go first and the prosecutors could come last, as that to be the lasting thing on the minds of the jurors. But that brother who took this case pro bono, forgive me, I don't remember his name. I'm sure he's going to have a hell of a closing argument that's going to make this okay. Now, I am not saying they're going to do the right thing. I want you guys to brace yourselves for the worst and be pleasantly surprised if he does 40 years for second-degree murder, because that is exactly what this was. I would venture to say it was first degree because he knew him. I'll get into that on another segment. But I want him in general population, so let's just be pleasantly surprised if he has to serve time. But anybody watching this trial sees clearly this is first-degree murder. A very jealous, very, very jealous glacier donkey, white inferior race soldier. But let me move on, and I'll get to that part. I think the prosecution is doing a wonderful job with every testimony showing those tapes and questioning them. Today was really hard. I think one of their eyewitnesses was 9-year-old, had to take the stand. Imagine how traumatized the young adults were. I think there were 4 in total today. And like I said, I'm saving that for tomorrow or Thursday. But the bottom line is, imagine the torment of having to endure that. Okay, so the defense attorney talked about standard police practice. Is putting a knee on a person's neck until the life force drains from them, is that standard police practice? Because that's something he's going to try to prove in this case. Okay, so he talked about, events surrounding, different acts of crime and violence, and how these events get blown up and out of proportion. But don't you see that only occurs with American descendants of chattel slavery? Kyle Rittenhour executed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters and seriously injured a third. The police gave him water. They gave him a bond. The white inferiors raised, I think, $2 million and bailed him out. Then they couldn't find it. Him and his mama got to run away and do all kind of things. Dylan Roof shut up the 9 in South Carolina, and they took him to Burger King. Okay? The recent shootings in down there with the 8 Asians, I think it was 6 Asians and 2 white folks, I can't recall. 6 Asian women, 1 Asian man, and 1 white man, I think, that were executed down in Georgia. First name Robert, I don't know his last name. It's not that impressive or important for me. I'm just giving you examples of how they've gotten away with murder and were taken alive. The fool, 21 looking 50. I can't even put that on 50. Hell, I'm 54. So I can't even put that on 50. He looked bad up in Oregon. I think he executed 10 folks, got taken alive. So please, let's stop acting like these events are escalated when it comes to all people. All lives matter except Black life. Hence the slogan. Next point. So he talked about how he's going to make a case that Floyd is actually responsible for his own death. The brother, Donald Williams, testified that the racist towel, the racist agent who was threatening to mace them and pushing them back and screaming at them and insulting them and terrorizing them is what he did. They were afraid to even speak up for George Floyd. They were afraid that they too would be next. Okay? He talked about how Fowl told him after George Floyd's life expired on the ground under the knee of Chauvin, That this is what drugs does to you. Donald Williams got him all the way together. And Donald Williams even said this is what America thinks of black folks. But when it comes to white folks and their opioid addictions, they get therapy. We get jail and get blamed for our own execution under the knee of the race soldier. There was no struggle. Okay, in the beginning, he struggled to get in the car, but what I observed was them dragging him out of the car to kill him. So if they were struggling, but they had the cuffs on him, he was afraid to get in the car. He knew it was going to cost his life. He all but said so. If there was such a struggle and he's so much bigger than the rest of y'all, why couldn't you tase him to get it under the control? No, because you purposely put a knee on his neck because Colin Kaepernick has been kneeling on the football fields. I see you. So you took a knee to George Floyd's neck. I see you, race soldiers. The FBI already told us in 2016 that the Chauvins have overwrought all the police forces throughout the country. And yet again, let me beg the question, whose neighborhood are they in? While folks want to say anti-Asian racism is up, when 68% of their assaults have been verbal, whose neighborhoods are they in, family? The man was cuffed. This was no endangerment to the officers. He was not even a danger to himself. This is my notes from watching day one. You're talking about endangerment. How many of you can go to YouTube and select any video where white folks are pulling guns on white cops and they're begging for them to put the weapon down? They ain't shooting them. Don't tell me this is a lack of training. This is a lack of, I've got a badge and I can execute you with impunity. I don't even need the white sheets anymore. I can do it by virtue of the badge because I've got what? Qualified immunity. Where's that executive order? Run me that executive order, Joe Biden. No, you sat up here and built over $300 million into the last COVID relief package for more of the same in our communities is what you did. After telling 87% of our electorate who was responsible for you in that seat of what you stole an entire primary for, that you had their backs. Where you at, Joe Biden? Where's our executive orders to hold these race soldiers responsible? Where is our executive order to deem the KKK a domestic terrorist organization? Where you at? On economic inclusion, on social justice, on dismantling private prisons. Why aren't all of the nonviolent offenders free who were peddling marijuana while the states turn a profit on marijuana? Where you at, Joe Biden? Protecting Asians who are wealthier than all of us in this country. And picking fights with China over humanitarian efforts when you got your own human rights violation for over 400 years against American descendants of chattel slavery in this country. I didn't know that hog tying was legal. So this defense attorney started blaming the audience for getting wild and rowdy. First of all, it wasn't that many of them out there. But now you're literally going to blame the crowd for being incensed and cussing y'all's asses out. That you were taking that brother's life right in front of them. Okay. Use of force only seems necessary when it comes to American descendant of chattel slavery. Like I said, white folks be wilding out on these race soldiers. They wowed out at the insurrection at the Capitol. They got more police and National Guard surrounding the courthouse during the jury process alone than they had all of the insurrection. Then white folks wowed out, smearing feces all throughout through the Capitol. They urinated. They stole bus. They sat up in Nancy Pelosi's chair and kicked their feet up. So don't talk to me, defense, about the use of force and how you're going to make a case that the use of that level of force against George Floyd was necessary. Miss me with it. They are guilty of murder. They failed to resuscitate him while on the scene. The paramedics failed to resuscitate him. They threw him on the gurney like they were taking out yesterday's trash. And did not try to resuscitate him right on the scene. They allowed that Chauvin to keep the knee on his neck until they went and got the gurney. The paramedics are just as guilty. So my thing is, y'all want to sit here and say you had to move him away to try to resuscitate him. So it's okay to execute him in front of the crowd, but all of a sudden when it comes to trying to resuscitate him, y'all couldn't do that. Okay. And when the defense was sitting up here talking about all of his health issues and his drug use, he's going to prove that that was the contributing cause of death. My question to you, was he living with all of his health issues when you accosted him? Was he living and breathing? Ergo, the knee on the neck is what killed him. Not his heart issues, his past COVID, his drug use. He said 27 times, I cannot breathe. And now I'm at 6:48. I've got to jump shortly, but I want to do this last part. This is my Freedmen history hero, living legend, Donald Williams. In my opinion, an expert eyewitness. I marvel at God. I marvel at God for having him just come from a fishing trip with his son and being able to make the analogy between the fish being suffocated in the plastic bag whose eyes were rolling as they were killing them to prepare them for a meal to what Chauvin did to Floyd. It was genius. That brother was fearless. Do you hear me? Oh my God. My new hero. So let me tell you just a little bit, and then I'm going to read a little bit about him, and then I'm going to jump to the next show. Okay. He is owns his own business. He's an entrepreneur, born and raised in the Twin Cities, private security, 10 years. He was a high school wrestler since the 7th grade. He's got mixed martial arts experience. He told Chauvin, you're putting that brother in the blood choke. And Chauvin, that was the only time he looked up to acknowledge him and said, looked at him and nodded. Yes, I am. The boldness of these race soldiers is unconscionable. He has worked with the police since 21. He trained with the police and FBI to understand the choke. You have to be susceptible, then tap out. If you don't, you can lose consciousness. In other words, as he was training in martial arts and training as a wrestler, you've got to be willing to surrender to the point of unconsciousness. And if you don't tap out, it's lights out for you. So he knew clearly the maneuver Chauvin was doing on Floyd to take his life. That's why I say it should be first-degree murder. He talked about Chauvin's foot wriggling to get a tighter grip to cut off his air supply. The brother was cold to the bone. He came to Cup Foods to get a beer after fishing. He couldn't even get inside because he heard the cries of George Floyd, and that led him over to the scene. And it reminds me so much of my bravery. Don't try this at home. But when spirit leads you, you got to answer the call. I remember going over to a Stevie Wonder concert to meet up with friends in LA. And as I was driving by with my daughter and her girlfriend, I saw about 20 race soldiers and one brother that weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. They had him in the same position as Floyd. I tried, just like this brother, I tried to keep going. I tried, but spirit convicted me. I feel bad because I forgot to roll down the windows to give my children some air. But it was like I was possessed. So here I am in full regalia, and God had a bench outside the church waiting for me, or some building. It wasn't a church. It was a nice bench. It was clean, as dirty as that area of town was, trying to get to this concert. This particular bench was clean, like God himself had cleaned it for me so I could have a seat. I know this man's conviction. And, I could not allow this to happen on my watch and go home to the news at 11. And this brother, homeless, if he had flashed on that news and I had not pulled that car over, I had to decide at that moment, which could I live with? Could I live with going there partying and then learning he was killed by the race soldiers? Or could I live or risk dying knowing I tried? I went over to that bench and I plopped my very dressed up ass right on the bench and told them to get up off that brother. And I wasn't leaving until they did. And I told the brother to please calm down the way Donald Williams told George Floyd. Everybody was pleading with him to calm down, but it didn't make any difference. Chauvin was in blood choke. And I talked to those officers as if I was bulletproof. I remember an immigrant lawyer, trying to talk to me about the events up until that point. And I'm looking at her like, why didn't you say something? You're a lawyer. Where's your phone? So I talked to them and I told that brother who looked me in my eyes, I said, I am not leaving until the ambulance comes for you. Trust and believe I got you. I'm sitting here to help cops. And I shame those officers. How dare you? This man is no threat to 20 race soldiers with your guns. How dare you? You need to get your knee up out of his back. He cannot breathe. And so they started talking to me about how he was going to be a danger to them and himself and all this kind of nonsense. And so I was like, how in the world is this tiny little man a threat to y'all? He ain't even got on drawers. I could see through the pants just hanging off of him. And you could tell this brother was otherwise very beautiful, but for his circumstance. And these race soldiers had decided the least amongst ADOCS doesn't get to live. Not today. So finally they let him up. And me and him had a connection. I said, I ain't going nowhere. I got you. I'm not going nowhere till I see you on a gurney in an ambulance. I said, you clearly see he's got mental health issues. You clearly see he's homeless. Not on my watch. And you just got to be ready to die. You just do. Yeah. Or, like I said, could I live with that or could I expire? I don't know. All I know is when the spirit overtake you, you got to do what you got to do to help your people because you understand how they got there. As soon as they got him chucked on that gurney, I disappeared as fast as I came. and I had peace of mind. So Donald Williams did just that. He was coming there for a beer, and the energy, the spirit, the God within him convicted him to head toward the cries of that brother crying out for his mother. Good Lord, I'm in 656. Okay. He heard voices, was drawn to the cry for his mother. You should let him up. He can't breathe. The people were concerned for George Floyd, pleaded to him to stop resisting as he pled for his mom. Officer Tao, Asian officer who's got protections under the badge and under Biden. He allowed it to happen. He forced his controls on everyone. George Floyd was speaking in a distressed way. He can't breathe. His stomach hurts. I want my mother. I'm sorry. Chauvin looked at the brother, Mr. Williams, to respond. He knew it was a blood chokehold. He, like I said, compared it to the fish in the bag suffocating was the analogy he used. Nosebleed, bowels moving, struggling to gasp for air, couldn't move. He was the most vocal, pleading for his life. Then the medics came on the scene. They kept begging them to check his pulse. They asked them multiple times. No one checked the pulse. Shout out to the 911 operator. I guess she saw some kind of way. I got to go back and review that part. She saw them killing Floyd, and she called the police sergeant. Everybody was trying to save that brother's life. We had allies out there that day, y'all. We had allies. Thou said it was the drugs. Williams says, no. This is not the drugs. It's y'all. Okay. So I want to just close with this. George Floyd's living is not in vain. He is, I don't even know the number of executions it took to get here for the world to be observing what's happening to ADOCS in this godforsaken country. But he is to our social and economic justice movement what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and our ancestors were, who were bitten by the dog, sprayed, executed for protesting, water hosed. When the cameras finally came, we finally got change. So I am very hopeful, family. And I want to thank you for tuning into this segment. If you'd like to join me in 2 minutes, 2 minutes, I'm going to end this broadcast and go to the next. Immigrants, if it weren't for ADOCS, I hope to see you over there. I love y'all, Black and Strong. Mwah. Peace, family. 2 minutes. Love y'all.